Should people be able to surrender their pets without consequence? I really like this question because I think it's incredibly complicated. And my answer is kind of. Kind of. I don't think the answer is that someone should be able to show up at an animal shelter any day, at any time, hand over their dog, and the shelter is automatically responsible for figuring out what happens next. But I also don't think making it incredibly difficult for people to surrender animals is a good policy. So here's what I think should happen. If you're the shelter responsible for animal intake in a community, so you're funded by the community, there should be an easy way for someone to contact you and explain exactly what's happening. And there should be a screening process because not every owner surrender is equally urgent. There are absolutely situations where someone may need to surrender an animal immediately. Maybe somebody is being hospitalized. Maybe they're going to prison, for example. Maybe there's a serious safety issue involving the animal. There are circumstances where waiting just simply isn't realistic. But then there are people who need to surrender an animal within the next few days. Maybe they're being evicted. Maybe they're moving into a house that doesn't allow their pet. Maybe there's a family emergency. Those cases are different, but they're different from someone standing at the shelter with an animal that has nowhere to go for that night. And then there's probably the largest group of people. And those are people who can keep their animal temporarily while the shelter works with them on a solution. And this is where I think we need to have an honest conversation about responsibility. Because once you take ownership of an animal, you do have some responsibility for what happens to said animal. If a shelter says, we don't have a kennel available today, but we can help you find a solution over the next 2 weeks, I don't think it's unreasonable to expect someone who is capable of doing that to participate in that process. Maybe that means keeping the animal temporarily. Maybe that means sending photos and information so that the shelter can market the animal before they come in. Maybe that means bringing the animal to adoption events. Maybe it means working with a trainer or a veterinarian to solve the problems that are causing the surrender. But the answer cannot always be, this is your problem now, bye-bye, because shelters have limits. There are only so many kennels. There are only so many foster homes. There's only so much time and funding. And every animal entering a shelter affects the animals that are already there. We actually deal with this at our own adoption organization. We tell adopters we'll always take our animals back, and we're over 3,000 adoptions now, and we mean it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we can take the animal back today. We talk to the adopter. They go through they fill out an application. We figure out what's happening. We determine the urgency of the situation. And when someone is able to keep the animal temporarily while we make space, we ask them to work with us. And you know what? For the most part, people do, and they are more than willing to do so, which is why I think it's better for shelters to not choose extremes. We don't have to say, show up anytime, we'll take your animal immediately. And we also shouldn't say, we're full, figure it out yourself, we're not going to help you, it's up to you. There should be something in between. An accessible surrender process, urgency screening, resources that help people keep their pets when possible, a clear path to surrender when keeping the animal isn't realistic. And yes, some level of responsibility from the person surrendering the animal. Because shelters absolutely should help people in crisis, and also pet ownership is a responsibility. And when someone is capable of participating and finding a safe solution for their animal, I think it's reasonable to expect them to do that. The goal shouldn't be to punish people for surrendering pets. The goal should be to create a system where the owner and the shelter share responsibility for getting the animal the safest possible outcome.